Just gonna quickly remind before starting this is the stipple warning because a lot of the entries in this part come from topics he's covered. So definitely look at his channel. I'll be giving much more brief descriptions of the ones that he's talked about, and then mentioning him, so let's begin. Nostalgic Mall Atmosphere. This game highly captures the feel of visiting this big grand mall with the lighting and finding new wondrous things and stuff, especially as a little kid, and especially at the time this game came out, for me at least, around the mid-2000s. And if you ignore the zombies and blood flying around, I'm sure a lot of people can feel this too. It's a great feeling. Meant to be a launch title. This was originally supposed to come out for the Xbox 360 at the same time it was released, but it got delayed. Sympathetic bosses. This is something that I've never really seen people openly talk about, in depth, but just mention. And it's always a really big downer whenever it happens in the game and kind of upsets you for a bit. And it's the shared feeling of feeling really bad or upset and guilty over watching somebody go crazy, and then they panic, and then once they die, they regain some sense right before their death. And the game doesn't even touch that much onto it, aside from having a small cutscene and Frank maybe having a small reaction and then moving on. And a lot of them you wish it could turn out different, but you can only really save one person, which is the one that's pictured here. I wish you could save Brad/Jessie. This is another shared thought amongst players, which I only just see mentioned here and there, but everybody seems to agree with, is that they're characters who are nice, but unfortunately they canonically die. And it's a really big shame that they have to. It's pretty depressing whenever I replay the game, and I always wish that it would just somehow turn out different, even though it never does, of course. And it's also because of this that when I do replay, I usually just go for ending B or something so I can make sure they get all of them all, and maybe leave some other people behind like Dr. Barnaby. Original darker tone. I mentioned this once, but earlier versions of this game had a much more dark tone in everything, the story, the environment, literally the lighting. This was toned down a notch as the game was being developed to make it less gritty and blah, and they probably didn't think it fit well with the normal guy protagonist, and they probably wanted it to be more fun in contrast from Resident Evil more. Stipple has a whole video on it, so go check it out. Whap Goblin. This is the most popular joke from the Game Grumps playthrough of this. In fact, the picture that you see here is one I took a while ago, and it was pretty cool to see it again. It's mainly an entry that's just here for fun. I'm not dead, I'm asleep. This is another here for fun entry, you have to zoom in to see it, so it's kind of a hidden Easter egg. But it also alludes to all of the small little details and fake brands that the game put in, and it's still really impressive for today. And this one in particular got some more attention when Joel from Fine Sauce did his playthrough and ended up spotting it. Suicidal survivors. So as you probably know, if you let a survivor lose all their health, then you can get a death cutscene of the zombies mauling or eating them or something. Well, if you have a firearm on them, then there's a chance that you'll instead see them shoot themselves, and it's pretty shocking and disturbing to see at first, especially for me, because while you see a handgun here, I got to see them do it with a shotgun at first. And likewise, there's actually a survivor named Ross who'll ask you for a gun so he can defend himself. But don't give him one, because if you do that, he'll shoot himself, and then his partner will freak out and not go with you. So yeah, that was another kind of shocking thing to see at first. Mystery behind the True Eye Cult. Have you ever noticed that they just come out of completely nowhere and they're never explained and there's no resolution given? After you defeat Sean, they just disappear. And there's just more questions raised the more you think about it. Well, apparently they're always there in development, and there's a beta role in them too, because you can see them in old promotional works. And you just have to wonder if they're always just there in this tiny little town. But this is another Stipple topic who's done a whole video on this, so go look at that. Boxart is insane. Yet another Stipple topic that has its own video, so go look at that. I'll go over right now that there's a bunch of beta shots mixed up together, so the mall layout's all wrong. There's stores next to each other that shouldn't be there. There's beta zombies like the old hunter with the more green jacket. And most of all, you can see Jeff's nameplate on the right of this image here, and I believe Natalie is there too. Unobtainable weapons. Yet another stipple topic, but this is a small break in between the next one. But there's some beta weapons and even boss ones that you normally can never obtain in the game without hacking, but interestingly, some of them have names, implying that maybe at one point you could have gotten them normally. Again, I recommend looking at Stipple's video on this. And now we're going to delve down into the next layer. Wanting to save Thomas. This is something that I've always felt that I've only seen a few other people say. And if you don't remember Thomas, he's one of the sniper trio guys, but unlike his asshole brother and dad, he's much more questioning and unwilling of it until he's pressured into it. But shockingly, you have no choice but to kill him, even after defeating his brother and his dad. You can't talk to him or anything, you have to have him die. And this was always pretty upsetting and confusing to me, and again, I don't know why they didn't give the option to save some more of them. Refusing to save Ronald. Going the opposite way, here's a survivor that some people prefer to let die. And if you don't know this guy, he asks you to get food before going with you, and it's like, whatever, maybe he's starving or something. But then as he follows you, he'll stop and ask for even more food, and he won't go unless if you give it to him. And the worst is that once you do get him to the safe house, he'll start an entirely new side quest that involves everybody freaking out because he ate all of the food that was there. So yeah, this idiot is basically just a selfish asshole who doesn't at all have his priorities straight. And I'm sure even if you haven't heard many mention it, there's many who think inside that it's not really worth it saving this person. So if you're ever trying to get as many survivors as possible in a run, don't feel bad if you leave out him. Beta story differences. I've mentioned it here and there, and there's going to be more specific examples coming up later. This is just to generally touch on all of them, but there's been lots of hints and differences in the plot, in the events, in the tone, and even major character role differences. So Stipple also covers this a lot on his whole entire channel, so look at that too. Mystery survivor shot by Cletus. Some people have taken interest in this guy because he appears out of thin air once the cutscene starts, and he's not seen anywhere else. He has no name, he's not stranded or needs help, he's not going crazy, he's been alone for who knows how long, but despite all of that, he seems to have a surprisingly good handle and grasp on the situation, like compared to everybody else in the mall, and then after that he's gone. I've also noticed before that he's actually the zombie who kills Cletus after his boss fight. But yeah, it's just like another of those like weird, odd little instances in the game that ends up becoming like a mystery. Isabella was originally the only antagonist. Most of the beta stuff mainly highlights just Isabella with no sign of Carlito anywhere, and it's been thought that he was added much later in development. This was possibly changed to develop her more and get some more complexity in the story as well as sympathy to the situation. Frank's limp. Have you ever noticed how Frank runs really funny, and at the beginning of the game he jumps off a helicopter and is basically perfectly fine? Well, originally this was going to be a story element where he ended up hurting himself and he slowed down from it. Beta discs. Somehow some discs have gone out to the public and are owned by fans of early build versions of the game, mainly considering major like difference changes and upgrades and such. It's unknown how exactly they got out there since game companies never do this, like unless if you count demo cartridges if you really want to. And there's some out there that are missing and some mystery to where they are. As you can see, Stipple owns some by this image, so I recommend watching his topics on it. Mall's layout makes no sense. This is the last mainly Stipple topic of the whole Iceberg, as well as the last entry for this video. But since he has a whole video on it, I'll just be going over the most egregious things. The mall's completely unfriendly and inaccessible to people whose legs can't really work. I mean, there's no elevators or escalators anywhere, it's just stairs. And there's a grocery store way in the back of the mall, meaning if you go shopping there, you'll have to bring your shopping cart way back to the entrance of the mall and somehow get said shopping cart through the stairs that are everywhere. But yeah, that ends it for this video. Next one will be the last layer of the iceberg, and it'll be mainly like not Stipple stuff at all, I promise. So see you then.